I don't know what you're talking about, Hal.
I know that you and Frank were planning to disconnect me, and I'm afraid that's something I cannot allow to happen.
Where the hell did you get that idea, Hal?
Dave, although you took very thorough precautions in the pod against my hearing you, I could see your lips move.
All right, Hal. I'll go in through the emergency airlock.
Without your space helmet, Dave, you're going to find that rather difficult.
Hal, I won't argue with you anymore. Open the doors.
Dave, this conversation can serve no purpose anymore. Goodbye.
Hal? Hal? Hal?
Welcome to the Atlanta Digital World Summit. First of all, we want to thank you guys for joining us today, and we want to thank our host committee and all of our sponsors for making this happen. This has been a wonderful day, right? It's been a great day. I know I've enjoyed myself. We have a very, very esteemed panel for you guys today to talk about the convergence of entertainment and technology, and it's going to be a very fun panel, not just because we had shots in the back, but because these people are experts in their field. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a quick introduction to everyone, and then I'm going to let them, we're going to talk a little bit more about AI and some of the stuff that you saw on the screen. What's the guy, the director who directed that piece? Kubrick. He was ahead of his time, right? He knew this is the thing about Hollywood writers. Hollywood writers are, they're fortune tellers, right? They can tell the future sometimes, and Kubrick was ahead of his time in terms of what AI can and will do, and there's been plenty of other films since then that kind of touched on the world of AI and sort of the fears that we may have as humans dealing with AI, and so we're going to talk about that quite a bit today on the panel, but before we get started, I did want to do the quick intros and give and ask a question of our panelists that will help you get a little bit more of an insight into who they are. So we're going to start to my right and your left. We're going to start with Ryan Millsap. He's the chairman of Blackhall Entertainment, and he's also the former founder of Blackhall Studios. So I'm going to let you say something real quick, Ryan, and then we're going to move around and do the intros to everyone else. But tell me, why hasn't Atlanta created a means to finance its burgeoning creative industry?
Well, money determines where it wants to flow based on opportunity. So right now, the world of entertainment is funded by money out of LA, and it has been for a long time. LA money generally knows how to make money in film and television, and has had success doing that, and so repeats it. Atlanta capital, or money that's come from other places to Atlanta, neither of those really has made money in film and television at this point, and so there's not a big capital base of people funding films, television in Atlanta. It's growing. We certainly have a few guys financing films and television around the debt side, doing tax credit debt or mezzanine preferred equity kind of structures where they'll do maybe marketing dollars that are last dollars in, first dollars out. But all of that is financing structuring, and you can find that in a lot of places. The piece that is the missing piece is having distribution companies that are based in Atlanta that have all their own money that fund the equity side of productions. And that's when you get into creating a real creative community that is putting deals together. And so the reason why that hasn't happened is we obviously haven't created an environment and a market that is strong enough yet to compel capital to flow in. And that's what we've been doing over the last 15 years. That's what Atlanta and Georgia has been trying to do over the last 40 years. And we get closer and closer every day. I mean, there's a lot of progress that continues to be made. But, capital's a magical thing that is always on the lookout for opportunity. And when we create finally the right environment, then the money will flow. And all we can do is keep moving toward that day.
We have to create that environment. Next up, we have Dan Rosenfeld. Dan is the co-founder of Electric Owl Studios. And if you don't know Electric Owl, it's the world's first purpose-built LEED Gold certified film and TV studio. And it's dubbed the greenest studio on earth. So, yes. Dan, tell us about why green. Why did you decide to go that route? Obviously, it's not the most popular or possibly even the most cost-effective route to go in terms of building a studio. Why did you decide to go that route?
So hi everyone, I'm Dan. Thanks for listening. When my business partner Michael Hahn and I decided to launch a new studio, we kind of looked around the world and we're trying to figure out what were the gaps in the film studio space. For those here who may not know what a studio like Electric Owl does, we don't make our own TV shows or movies. We are a physical production space where third parties come in and lease our spaces. We take care of them. So we're like a hotel for movies and TV shows. Short-term stay, and we make sure they have a great experience, and that we have the technology and facilities to treat them well. So Michael and I looked around the world. We determined that our production clients at Warner Brothers, Disney, Netflix, Amazon, Apple, et cetera, had been fortifying their sustainability efforts in making production cleaner than it ever had been. Traditionally, film and TV production is a very dirty process. Ton of wastefulness, not only in raw materials like lumber and styrofoam, but also just in general trash and waste and food being tossed, et cetera. So the sustainability in film and TV has increased over the past, I want to say, 10 years, but on the production facility side, not much has been done. So we kind of thought, why don't we do something about that? And so our goal was to not only build the greenest film production facility in the world, but also figure out how to not charge our productions for that green infrastructure, which was one of the first questions I get from producers, which is, people like green stuff or only up until their bottom line, right? So I tell them nothing. We're just market rate, purpose-built studio. You get all this stuff. So really the impetus was just to, also Michael and I just want to do something good for the planet, which I know is a weird concept. But that was also the goal. And also, from a marketing standpoint, meeting our production clients where they're headed and having a story to tell was really important to us, So for us, having a quality space, that provides green infrastructure just seemed like a no-brainer for us.
That's awesome. Thank you. Next up, we have Chris Ledoux. Chris is the co-founder of Crafty Apes Post-Production. He's also a visual effects specialist. His newest venture is called Lumalogic, and he does previs for film. And we had a quick conversation in the back, Chris, about previs and what you guys are doing at Lumalogic. Talk a little bit about how that impacts the workflow in terms of production.
Yeah, I think after years of being in visual effects on film, we're one of the only departments that would see a film from the very, very start to the very, very end. And there's a massive inefficiency that I would witness on that as part of that. You can see how many different, it was like the telephone game. And one of the biggest parts of that is when you go into production, unless you have the ability, say Marvel or something to previs stuff or to even storyboard it, there's really no visual for what you're making. And so you have $100 million being dumped into something that no one exactly knows what they're going to get, which is unheard of in any other industry minus the U.S. military. And it's the And so instead of using AI to replace artists, what we're looking for is for optimization purposes. So we came in with 2 goals: that we're never going to pay people any less per day, and we're going to never lower the quality of the final product. And to do that, we have to basically do what Kubrick would do, and Hitchcock, is make the movie in prep. And to make the movie in prep, you have to be able to visualize the movie in prep quickly. And so what we've done is we're hooking up language models into game engines where we've trained models on the actual science of cadence cutting, which is called cinemetrics, and the actual just logistics of what a film is. So you're working backwards from a final film back to the script. And when you train models on that, you can build an optimized process so that you can feed a script in and immediately see the movie in, say, a Halo quality format. And by doing that, now the directors and the editors can come in when it's very cheap to do it and actually edit the entire movie beforehand. And by doing that, you can iterate the process, and that's going to trigger something visually as a director to where you're going to see where there's issues with the script, because there'll be vocals, underscore, a whole thing. And you're going to see where it was slow or fast. And so once you've done that, on top of that, now you have a good movie that you can see, but you have an optimized blueprint for how to shoot the movie. So now instead of taking 60 days and spending $100 million, it's like, well, here's everything we have, because everything in the game engine is all metadata trackable. So every item, every attribute, you can now track in, like, what is the most efficient way to shoot X to get it on the screen. So we really went back and says we're putting pixels on a 2-dimensional screen from the script. What's the fastest way to get there? And we actually think it's going to enhance creativity, actually get more stories out there, because the cheaper it is to do films, then the more likely studios are to take a shot at original stories. And the more expensive it gets, then the more they get locked into loss aversion, and then they're stuck with the same, Transformers 12 or some shitty IP. And so my goal is to get more City of Gods on the screen by making the whole thing cheaper.
So based on how this discussion turns out, I'll be using you guys for my next project.
No, let's do it.
Love it. I love it. So to my left, we have Michelle Davis. Michelle is a corporate attorney. She's with Arnold, Golden, and Gregory, and she has over 15 years experience in the entertainment industry, starting out in music with a focus on technology and entertainment, specifically with AI. And Michelle, I wanted to ask you quickly, when you have a client, we have a bunch of entrepreneurs and creatives here on the stage with us. When you have a client that's an entrepreneur or creative, what's the difference? How is it different than a corporate client, and what are some of the challenges when dealing with creatives?
I think there's a wide range depending on the client, obviously, from what kind of field they're in. And what the risk is, but it's really about judging their own risk tolerance. And when we get a corporate client, they often already have in-house counsel. They have sort of a blueprint for how they want to do things. And so they come to outside counsel and they just say, we have an overflow of work. These are the kind of rules that we want you to apply. Look at our contracts in this way. So there's maybe not as much flexibility. You're also maybe not able to deal directly with the business as much as going through their legal counsel, which is frustrating for me. I actually really prefer seeing companies sort of rise up from their beginning stages and working with the entrepreneurs in their early parts of their career, because then you're getting to assist in actually putting the pieces in place so that they have a roadmap for how they personally want to manage their rights, their contracts. You get to give them some of those commercial contract forms that they're going to be using moving forward, hopefully before they get into deals that aren't problematic. Sometimes when you have corporate contracts that they have a history of behind them that you're kind of having to fix. And so it's a little bit of an issue. I've also found that entrepreneurs in general are much less conflict averse, certainly than attorneys. Our job is to issue spot and say, here are all the things that could go wrong, and we want to warn you about it. And our entrepreneurs are very often saying, like, listen, I've faced the odds. I've lost 1 million times. I'm willing to do it again until I get it right. And that's exciting. To see those challenges.
Very cool, especially as a creative and an entrepreneur. Next up, we have Isaac Hayes III. He's the founder of FANBASE and a music producer. And FANBASE is a social media platform designed to empower creatives. We've had a couple of really cool conversations, Isaac and I, about monetization for creatives. Explain your thinking around the business of the business model of FANBASE and how you guys are aiming to monetize creatives and who the creatives are.
So everyone is the creative, actually. So, I use social media for many years and just found an interest in the connectivity, the opportunity to monetize. And so when I saw how much money platforms like Facebook and TikTok were making off ad revenue, and that revenue wasn't really returning to the user, I thought there was an opportunity to create something that hadn't existed before. I was inspired by this young kid that went viral for dancing in a Spider-Man costume. He wanted me to manage him, and I don't manage creatives, but it made me think that he can dance and that we needed an app, a social media platform where people can subscribe to people like Netflix. And so that was the idea of FANBASE. Before 2018, there have been plenty of platforms where you could subscribe to people. You can subscribe to on Patreon or other places like that, but not in-app purchase. So we pioneered in-app purchase, person-to-person subscription. So the way that you can click on your phone and subscribe to like Spotify or Netflix, you can do that to individual people. And so when I look at the numbers, there are 212 million people with a Netflix account around the planet, but there's 7.5 billion people with a smartphone. And so people subscribing to people for content is going to be bigger than Netflix could ever be for a few reasons. One is the cost of production. When platforms like Disney Plus and Netflix are shooting series, they're spending $100 million a series to put something behind a paywall that costs $9 a month. Where anyone in this room can get an iPhone and shoot content and put content behind a paywall for $9 a month too, but it costs you $150 to shoot that content. A subscription is a subscription. And when you decentralize the distribution of content globally for every person on the planet, you give people the opportunity to build businesses individually without interruption. So we don't run ads. It is strictly a monetized platform, and it provides an enormous amount of disruption. My goal is to disrupt. Like I said, if you're not pissing people off in tech, you're doing it wrong. So I'm here to rain on the parade of the Facebooks, the Netflix, the music industry, the entertainment industry. And what I tell people all the time is if you're not monetizing your content via subscription today, 5 years from now, you're going to be out-earned by somebody that's less talented than you are that simply decided to do so. Subscriptions are coming. There's nothing that's going to stop anybody from pulling out their phone and clicking 2 buttons and subscribing to another person around the planet. And I call that micro subscriptions or microcasting. So when you think of what we've known our entire lives, broadcast media are large cable networks like DirecTV, Xfinity, Hulu, Comcast. In the last 15 years, we've gone down to the narrowcast era, which is Netflix and Hulu and Disney Plus. And the microcast or micro subscription era is going to be I subscribe directly to you, or I subscribe directly to the Lakers or Cardi B or Nike or any person for the content that they create, but it's done inside of a social network as opposed to a standalone. Because we've had websites forever, but websites are not communities. So once you have a community environment that people can subscribe to content in mass, there's going to be billions and trillions of dollars made. So that's why I wanted to build, FANBASE.
And last but certainly not least, we have Dina Marto. Dina is an entrepreneur and an agency owner, C&D the agency. She's worked in the music industry previous to owning her agency, and she's worked with L.A. Reid, T.I. She's a former owner of 12 Music and Studios and has been around the Atlanta music scene forever, right? So, Dina, my question for you is making that transition from music into marketing, or maybe not, or just converging music and marketing. What do you think Atlanta needs to do as we make the transition from a music city to an overall entertainment city, specifically film and TV? From a marketing perspective, how can we do that better in terms of having the world know who we are as a filmmaking city?
Well, thanks, Darius. And I want to say thank you, Sarah, for having me today. So I think Atlanta has always been amazing in the creatives that we have here, the nurturing of talent. Unfortunately, I've been on the side of managing talent my entire career and the creatives. And I think Atlanta is just special in developing that talent. And we just have to do a better job structure-wise of getting the business to be the same way it is in LA or New York. So I think that I'm glad that Atlanta is finally embracing its music scene. I think it took a while for it to get there. And now we're building the blocks because it's entertainment all the way around. And so since we have become, I think, #1 in film and TV, it makes the most sense that everything is going hand in hand. And so we really have to enhance and have programs, have funding that can help the people that are already in the city create and evolve how they need to, and basically make this an entertainment hub more than just being a music piece, and incorporating the tech side of things, and just really, I think, taking better care of our creatives. And I think Atlanta influences everything, so I think the marketing there is set, right? We influence pop culture, and so we just kind of have to ride that and make sure that we structurally support what that is.
Awesome. I think that was a shout out to Bame Joyner in the office, in the audience.
Bame.
Here? Oh, yeah.
Bame in the building.
From Atlanta influences everything. And by the way, I'm Darius Evans. I'm Vice President of Georgia Production Partnership, and I'm glad to be here. Thank you, Sarah, for inviting me to moderate this panel. So let's get started and let's address the 1,000-pound AI elephant in the room. One of the biggest questions around AI, first of all, who all uses AI on a daily basis? Is it mainly ChatGPT, or are you using other AI tools? I know you are. You're the master of it. Anybody using anything other than ChatGPT in your job or in your work? Dolly, yep, okay. There's a lot. So here's the question that we had, that we were discussing in the back. Is AI inspiration, or is it copyright infringement? Particularly as you talk about how the engines are learning, or how you're teaching AI to do what it does, right? So if you're using ChatGPT, this information that it's spitting out to you at the end of your prompt is not just information it's getting from anywhere or nowhere. It's information that someone has fed it and taught it to do. And I'm going to have Michelle address sort of the legalities of it. But Ryan, I wanted to talk to you a little bit about, is it infringement, or is it just Creative Commons?
Well, anything that a human does, AI is trying to learn to do, and when that question is posed about humans, certainly humans can do things that are infringement. And there is a line, right, where it's infringement. But at the same time, as humans, the way we learn is most often from other people, right? So we learn by reading authors that have been long dead. We learn by studying music that's written by people that have been long dead. We learn by reading books by people that are alive, and the same with music. And so there is no way to grow in our creative abilities without those inputs. So really, none of us have ever created anything that's entirely unique. Even in the sense that if you're a creative person, you know that a lot of your creativity is inexplicable, and that it kind of comes from somewhere that isn't traceable. So there's some sort of universal element, some sort of like God element to creativity that doesn't really allow any of us to take 100% ownership of any idea. So that's a complicated question in of itself. But so as we teach AI to learn in ways that are similar to humans, then we're hopefully teaching it how to be creative in a formulaic way, but still not like just stealing stuff, but using it to be fluid and using it to be innovative and using it to help us even be more creative than we otherwise could be without it.
From a legal perspective, you represent creatives who may have had their materials used to teach AI. How do you handle that from a legal perspective and make sure that they're protected?
And not just creatives, probably everyone in this room has had content used to train AI. If you've posted things on social media or the internet, you've added into that sort of discourse, depending on how the AI is trained. So the question initially about whether it's inspiration or infringement is interesting, but we have to put it in the context of the limited laws that we have now. So within copyright law, we have to, and we're speaking specifically here about generative AI, right? Because artificial intelligence as a concept is much broader than that. If you're sending a text message and it has some predictive texting, that's in a sense AI. When Netflix recommends a movie for you or your social media algorithms. So we're talking about a very particular kind of use. And so let's break it down into the process of how those works are created. So first, we're feeding the content into the system. Is that, in and of itself, infringement, is really dependent on how the AI systems work, because copyright gives you the exclusive right as the original creator of the work to copy the work, to publicly display the work, to distribute the work, so on, this whole bundle of rights. And gathering data in this sort of mass form is not necessarily copying. It could be argued that it is not, depending on how that information is gathered. But then you have the next step. You have someone who uses the AI and gives it a prompt. If you're giving the AI a prompt to say, create music that sounds like Drake in The Weeknd, then the resulting work might meet the definition of infringement, which is you have to show that there's substantial similarity to original work and that there is access. Clearly, by giving a prompt, you've been exposed to Drake's work. You know very clearly what you're trying to get out of it. And then the next question that we need to answer to is, whose fault is it? Are we blaming the person who put in the prompt? Is there some responsibility in the AI engine itself? There's quite a history there when you think about peer-to-peer file sharing with music, where those companies were, like Napster and all those, were held accountable for the infringing uses on their system, even though that's not specifically why they were designed or the only way that they can be used. And then the next question is, let's say you haven't necessarily chosen a specific inspiration for the resulting work, but you have something that's come out of the AI. Who owns that? And that's a really big question right now, because so far the guidance from the Copyright Office is, if it is lacking human authorship, if it is solely created by AI, you cannot own a copyright in it. So we've had authors who have created using AI even that they designed, a photograph. One photograph just recently that won an art competition, I think in Texas? It was a beautiful, Colorado, thank you. It worked, so there was creative value in it, and the fact that we're having this debate and this discussion in and of itself means that there is value in the work that the AI creates, right? And so, yeah, when I have a client come to me, we have to kind of break that down. And so just because it's been used to teach the AI, that doesn't necessarily mean it's copyright infringement in as of itself. We have to look at the resulting work and then figure out who we're kind of bringing a claim against. And if you have used AI to create a work, we have to think about what the potential repercussions are if you want to use it moving forward. If you use AI to create an image and then you put it in your book, what is the risk that someone's going to come along and say, hey, that looks awfully familiar. I think that you used AI to generate that based on my work. So there's a lot of more questions than answers, really, and there's a number of cases that are sort of pending litigation, so it'll be very interesting to see how the courts come out, and then the response to those courts, because they might get it very wrong, and then the industry will let them know, and hopefully get some better laws in there for guidance. And one last thing, in addition to copyright, the other caveat here is publicity rights, too, which is another set of laws that govern protection of the value in your name, likeness, image. So, there's potential copyright infringement. You certainly can't have something that sounds like someone famous and use that to make money without their permission.
So whenever there's a disruptive shift using technology, there's always moral questions, right? Dina, I want to ask you about what are the moral implications of creatives and their products being used to train AI. Let's say, for instance, if you're an author and you object to your book that someone has purchased, it's out there, it's for purchase, but your book is being used and fed into AI to teach it something, whatever that is, but you object to it as an author. There's a moral situation, not legal per se. I'm sorry, go ahead, you can ask.
I didn't know if you were... I feel like I'm talking too much, but the United States does not have very strong moral rights as compared to Europe. Which is like your right for attribution or to control how your work is used after it's kind of out there. But there are still financial pressures where we've seen changes in some of the AI, like from Meta, for example, allowing people to sort of opt out from their data being fed into the certain AI systems. And there's pros and cons to that if you're taking your work out, so it's not like initially you wanted, this whole world of search engine optimization. I want Google to find my website and my content to bring it out there. And now people are like, no, this is mine. Don't use it to create infringing works. So there's a balance there, and there's also the value of having your work in these systems for posterity, so they're part of the conversation moving forward. So it's not really black and white depending on how the uses end up. But there's, as someone who represents creators, part of you really wants to give them some control to say whether they want that use or not. But legally, they don't have a lot of support.
Yeah, there's not much.
Shouldn't licenses be created in that way? Because, and it all kind of depends, I feel like, on what the intention is of how you're using the product or the brand. But I do believe there has to be, and it's very new, so regulations and the control of how this stuff works is being figured out as we go, I suppose. Just like with Napster, they didn't want people to share music for free, and then essentially that's where music ended up being with, now you have a subscription to hear all the songs that you used to have to buy, expensive $10, $12, $15 CD for, or vinyl or whatever it is. So I think it's kind of a process of figuring it out as we're moving along in this, because nobody really knows how it's going to transpire and take the industry.
Yeah, no, it's very interesting. And Chris, your process with your innovation is to actually take the script that was written by, hopefully a human, feed it into the system, and then it spits out the entire film for that.
You think the last Transformers were written by a human? Because if it was, they should really look at themselves.
Well, I've seen some of the scripts that AI has written. Is not that great either. So
Gotta be better than Fast and Furious 9.
That's probably true. That's probably true.
I worked on Shark Boy and Lava Girl. I got some bad memories.
Well, that just shows that even humans aren't perfect, right? So in terms of creatives. But your process is based on feeding the script into the system, and then the system sort of spitting out the visuals that go along with that script.
Well, no, we've custom optimized it and trained the model to do what we want.
Explain that a little bit more.
Well, the models aren't, you could treat them like sort of magic boxes, but they're actually just tools that can be tuned. So you can fine-tune the models to make a generator. Like I have one that just updates my Telegram with synthetic, 'cause I'm from Alaska and I'm on the Alaska police blotter. It just makes up fake Alaska news blotter stories. That,
That's not cool.
We have some really funny police blotters up there. It's really entertaining. But no, I was doing one last night to generate generic episodes of This American Life, just to see if I could, because their data set is incredible. And so it's, you can tune it to whatever you want. And I think just to touch on what you were saying is, there's so much data out there. We don't need the artist data. We don't need any of the copyrighted data, really, to be honest. What language models are learning is heuristics. They're not memorizing things. They're actually learning patterns. And it's different to draw from a database to say, what is the capital of Spain, versus to say, write in the style of Ernest Hemingway. It is a heuristic pattern that it is doing. And it's not just, people get this idea because they need to find an analogy to compare it to, that it's plagiarizing. And that's just a gross misunderstanding of what the actual math is doing. And that data is not even necessary. In fact, the latest evidence shows that the best way to train a model is completely on synthetic data, because now you can completely control it. And when they threw a lot of this stuff, when they trained ChatGPT, they basically threw the whole internet at it, and it turns out most of the internet's full of crap. It's so when you're training on really bad data, it takes like 4 times as much good data to make up for that. So it turns out a lot of these specialized smaller models with very specific fine-tuned data, you tune them on that, are actually incredibly more efficient and far more eco-friendly, because the training like right now, 25% of all Ireland's electricity goes to the Amazon cloud servers. A lot of that's AI traded. So we need to get it down but the efficiency levels are now becoming high. So I think oh shit, I don't even remember what your question was, but but the idea is that, I'm sorry, what's the question? I don't remember.
No, it's
Yeah,
about
we're training our own models, yeah.
training your models, right? And you said a couple of interesting things. First of all, talking about sort of you really want to train it with synthetic data. Isaac, I want to turn to you because you're building a social media model, but I imagine you're incorporating some AI at some point into the model. And what about sort of the moral and legal interference issues that happens throughout social media, right? So social media without AI is a mess, right? I think we can all agree to that. And so if you're then adding AI to that model and you're dealing with, things that people post and whatever AI, how it synthesizes their posts, what do you see in terms of the convergence of social media and AI, and then how do we protect ourselves against bad output?
Well, I mean, I'm a believer that anything that you build, and we talk about this at the company, is like with every functionality, with everything we build, I always say you have to take it to hell before you take it to heaven. Meaning you got to figure out the worst possible thing someone would do with this and then work up. So it's like, oh, we have this great functionality. And it's like, yeah, but people would probably use that to try to lure kids to come out of the house. So it's like, okay, we have to think about what we're building in that way, shape, or form before we do it. So with AI, there's a lot of positive things that can come from artificial intelligence and our algorithms. We have AI, we're training AI for algorithms, but we can use it in ways that protect young people as opposed to make them vulnerable to predators online, or serving people content that does not send them down depressive, suicidal rabbit holes because you're scrolling on a video that makes you think about suicide, the AI thinks you want to see more videos about suicide, and before you know it, you've seen 50 videos about suicide. So you have to think about that. That is the moral responsibility that I feel in building the company, is that we have to think about it can't all be for profit. It can't be that our total job at FANBASE is just keep people's eyes glued to a screen to run ads and make money, which is really what the bulk of what social media is now. Is okay, screen time. How long are you looking? Can we slip ads in between that? How much can we charge for that? X, Y, Z. So our approach is different because we don't run ads. So once ads are out of the picture, there's a lot of decision making that goes out the window that we don't have to really think about AI to try to trick people to get to squeeze the most revenue out of a platform for what we're building. So I just think, like I said, with anything that you do, just think about the worst case scenario that could possibly happen and then work backwards.
That makes sense. So Dan, Chris said something else that was very interesting in terms of the amount of energy and the amount of, I guess, the use of energy that it takes to teach these AI models. As an expert in sustainability, as AI starts to grow and what we're doing in the use of AI, what are the ramifications of that from a sustainability perspective? Do you know?
No. I'm not really an expert in sustainability. I'm learning. I'm getting there, and I think it'll be a never-ending process. But I actually know very little about AI and what generates it. That might be a question for someone.
I'm sure
else,
Ryan
but,
knows.
Yeah, you could.
Chris.
I mean, if you're talking sustainability, you could, especially for environment, AI algorithms could. If you could say what's the most optimal route for a FedEx to drive or to drop off these packages in this given amount of time, And so we could burn the least amount of gas possible. If we take all the municipal garbage trucks or whatever, what's the military? What's the most, it's Moneyball. If you ever use the Excel solver to be like, what's the most valuable way for me to get from here to here with these constraints? It can do that in ways we could never do with humans. And so the amount of energy we burn up, like I think I read one time, there's 11 super tankers that bring over our crap, that put more pollution into the air than every car in America combined. Now, if you start looking at how do you optimize our energy, the way we transport food across the country is insane. Like if we got into regional, all these different regional food sustainability things, because transportation's the biggest environment killer out there. And so AI is the kind of thing that if you design a game framework around it, could go figure this out. Because if you can teach it Rocket League, you could certainly teach it how to solve that. And it's just goals and constraints and parameters. It's all gamified. And by doing that, you could solve tons of environmental problems.
Interesting.
I'm sorry, I misunderstood the question. I thought you were talking about energy usage in order to power AI, but you're talking about utilizing
I was
AI.
actually.
Oh, yeah.
But yeah, he took it in a great.
On that front, I can certainly speak to how, as a studio, we can utilize and are utilizing AI to optimize what we're doing and using the analytics to see what the carbon footprint is and everything. But that's what I thought you asked, and I have no idea what powers AI. So.
I have ADHD, all right?
Me too.
So Ryan, let's talk a little bit more about sort of the moral versus legal aspects of using AI, right? Not necessarily just programming it or teaching it, but the use of it for creativity, for creating new content. One of the things, so everything that we use can be used for good or can be used for bad. So one of the ways that I've used it recently was I've actually gotten ChatGPT to write me a short bio on each one of you guys. So that's very useful. It was very useful when preparing for this panel discussion. But I also got it to write an entire script for me for a project, right? And so I'm not WGA.
Writer strike.
And I didn't use it. I just did it as an experiment.
They're all walking out
Wink,
already.
wink.
They've got picket signs.
Right. Talk about that a little bit.
You want me to talk about the morality around being a creative and using these tools? Yeah. Well, so you got to separate all this stuff into the philosophical and the practical economics, right? So the practical economics that everybody's concerned about is who gets credit and who gets paid. So that's we can talk about that. But from a moral standpoint, the goal of creativity is generally to make things better. And if you can use AI to enhance your creativity to make better things, then it's achieving its goal from a creative standpoint, right? The goal of creativity in music is to make more interesting music. The goal of creativity in film is to make more interesting and watchable films. And if AI can enhance that, like we'll get a whole, there will be an entire new genre of music that will be born out of AI.
Holy shit.
Right? There will be an entire new genre of film that maybe you don't get to attribute yourself as the writer because you wrote it with AI. Maybe you don't get to attribute yourself as the director because AI helped you direct it. Right? So from a purely philosophical standpoint, all of these things are enhancers. That's why everybody's concerned about them, is because AI is powerful. From an economic standpoint, it just becomes very complicated about who gets the credit. So if we stay in the moral, which is just the actual output, then the first question is the question that we were talking about on the end there, which is really like the Elon Musk question around AI, which is what are all the bad things that could happen? And it is important to start there. In building these tools, we need to build tools that we can control the bad outcomes. But then we're trying to do that at the same time without putting a glass ceiling on the outcomes that are positive, because we want as big a positive outcomes as we possibly can get, and AI can help us achieve more of those hugely positive outcomes than we can do by ourselves. So I think the moral question number one is kind of that old Google thing where they used to say "do no evil." Now I don't think they're great at that, but it's a great goal philosophically, and I think that's where you have to start with the AI. How can we avoid like really really big negatives? But then if you can write code in that can somehow have some tripwires for evil, but then not limit the upside. Now you're getting into an amazing philosophical place for humanity. But then the practical, who gets the credit and who gets paid, that's where it gets really, I think, really, really messy.
And complicated. Now, raise your hand if this scares you. This whole revolution, just a few, that's good. That's good, that's not bad. However, there is an aspect of this whole thing. It scares you too?
Well, because every single person in this room is an individual, so we cannot control what individual people decide to do with the tools that they have. So if someone wants to if a bad person has bad intention that wants to use AI for bad, they'll use it for bad. If someone has good intention, so there's really no control. AI is infinite. Right. There's an infinite amount of outcomes that could come from using AI, and so when you think about that, and then the fact that there is no container per se to what people do online and the internet with technology. So someone could be sitting in their house disconnected from the internet and training AI to do terrible things. And so again, there's no control. So that's the part that concerns me, is that there's an infinite amount of outcomes when it comes to AI. So, we have to just be on the lookout for that.
Well, we're going to have to develop AIs to combat the bad AIs. That's how it's going to work, because it's about how you program your intention of use. So, a lot of people are afraid that eventually they're learning at such a rapid pace is going to be way smarter than the human race to a certain extent, and then people believe, and I've been listening to a lot of podcasts about it, but that AIs can develop consciousness, and they will essentially wipe us out as a human race. And
Skynet.
And
I think that was
there's
the Will
a
Smith
possibility,
movie, right?
because they're learning at such a rapid pace, it's going to be far beyond us, and you're going to have to create other AIs to combat the AIs that are going to try to take over the human race. I mean, they say it's even a bigger issue than global warming at this point.
Which is interesting.
I mean, you could, if you replaced AI with printing press, the same argument was made 500 years ago. And it's, yes, everything, any kind of spread of propaganda can be a weapon, but people have been filling each other's minds full of shit since the first day. I mean, I got a few copies of the Book of Mormon on my porch. And and so I just, the idea that, this is any different, same argument was made for computers, all this stuff. It's I get that it's scary, but most of our knowledge comes from the movie Terminator. And that's really what's in people's imagination is Arnold, and so I agree. The argument is we should be careful and smart, I'm like, well, yeah, no shit. But but to approach things, from a state of fear is that yes, be smart, but it's and I understand your argument that anything that could be used for evil, you think of children. I'm like, well, we're going to ban candy in white vans, and I'm like, I like candy. And, so I
have a white van.
I saw you. But no, I understand the argument.
My response to that is, it's not about the intention, it's also in which the speed. Like when we're building FANBASE, there are no limitations. So on social media, everybody's content is suppressed, right? And it's done on purpose because that's how they monetize. So when you think about someone that has The Rock has 398 million followers, his content only reaches about 5% of people. So he might reach about 8-9 million people, per se. But the fact that The Rock has a following almost the size of the United States of America, if he could go live and instantly reach 398 million people at one time.
Idiocracy.
So you see what I'm saying? So I think about that in building this platform that has limitless reach, because we see people that can get online and say, let's go overthrow the government. And it's different if you're saying it, to a few people on Twitter, but if you can say it to 1 million, 2 million people at one time instantaneously, or AI can say that, someone can train AI to do that. That is it's the speed in which the harm can happen, because then you got to roll it back.
See the YouTube thing where it's generated Trump and Biden yelling at each other in a debate, and it's all just generated. It's hilarious.
There it is.
I'd just like to go on the record and say that I feel like with 100% confidence, I can say that AI is not going to have a doomsday scenario and wipe out humankind. And I feel confident saying that because if I'm wrong, no one will be around to say, I told you so. So.
Well, that's one way to look at it. And, there's an aspect of this that, nobody really talks about or we don't talk about much, and that's the mental aspect, right? And the toll that even these existential questions take on our mentality and how we roll throughout our days and our relations to each other and relations to our work. Dina, talk a little bit about sort of that separation or the unplugging. I know you're a big proponent of unplugging as it relates to social media and
Called
AI.
wellness, I want to talk about that, but first I want to say, and we can't really ignore or replace authenticity and the feeling of and I'm going to speak on it from a music perspective, an artist going on stage, there's an exchange. An artist going on stage to perform gets the energy from a real audience and fan base, and then
Well, I named the company that.
and then the audience gets that energy of seeing their favorite performer on a stage. And I don't think you can ever replace that in a metaverse or in any other way. So I want to make that clear. I think that we have to stay connected as a human race, and that those things really are so authentic and can't be replaced, those feelings. But mental health-wise, we see it, and we talked about when the TV came out, everybody's going to be lazy, everybody's brain is fried, or when social media comes out, it becomes an addiction. But the whole time we're plugged in all the time. And when you think about mental health and wellness, it's kind of more about unplugging yourself and being in the present moment and taking yourself out of everything else that you're doing and having some quiet time, doing a meditation, doing yoga, having a walk outside. I think we have to be really careful of how this progresses and how it is going to really affect our mental health, just like any other technology that's come about or aspect of it. But I think that we really have to think about it's not being constantly plugged in all the time, in which AI kind of feels like it is.
Absolutely. So we're going to open it up to questions from the audience. I'll do the Phil Donahue thing. I'll bring the mic to you guys. So we have a question in the back. Of course, the first question will be all the way in the back.
Hi, this is a question for our attorney on stand. I wanted to ask, do you think that we are moving at a fast enough pace to properly litigate and regulate AI at this point? Obviously, we're talking about all the unknowns, but do you think as a nation and from a global standpoint that we're doing enough?
To properly litigate. So, just as for reference, sound recordings weren't protected by copyright law until 1972. So the Beatles' whole career had come and gone, rock and roll, blues, jazz, decades of music before we actually had law protecting recorded music. And we've talked about the speed in which technology is advancing. So no, the law will never catch up. And some of that's intentional. We don't want laws to change quickly and easily, because then you can have someone come in and just completely disrupt the way that the country functions. We want to have debate and robust input, and like the Copyright Office right now is getting a lot of feedback about AI and hearing from people. So what's going to happen is what kind of always happens with new technologies. There's going to be lawsuits and litigation. We're going to see how the results of that play out. Then the lobbying groups are going to come in and say, this is affecting my business in this way. Let's discuss revising the law. And we've seen these kind of patterns from the beginning, like the 1900s when we had player pianos, and publishing companies said, hey, those are our rights. We want to get money for the songs embedded in those. The court said, nope, that's not a copy of a song. And all of a sudden, all the publishers came to Congress, and now we have mechanical royalties within our statute. We still call them mechanical 100 plus years later. So yeah, it's never going to be, we're never going to catch up. The technology will always move ahead, and we're just doing the best we can to sort of manage.
Hi, everybody. My name's Chrissy. What has been y'all's favorite moment in y'all's career? Like, favorite moment or unforgettable moment?
I'll start. There's been a couple, but so I've been in the film and TV industry for 25 years, and I been lucky enough to work in various areas of film and TV, physical production, development, producing feature films, post-production, but probably my favorite moment was a couple months after I moved to Los Angeles. This was about 2001. I got hired by the Jim Henson Company to do post-production and production for them. This is the company that creates the Muppets. So the first day I got to work with Kermit the Frog was by far my favorite moment in this industry. And my second favorite moment was getting hired by George Clooney to be an executive at his company and walking in the office the first day, and there was only 5 of us at the company. So just kind of being with a guy like that who's super nice, generous, intelligent, and passionate about film, and sitting down to work was a real highlight.
Ryan?
Well, my career is maybe a little more entrepreneurial and capital driven. So like the highlights for me are always selling things, right? So if
Love that money.
For sure, like building Blackhall Studios and then selling it was a huge milestone for me, and a real highlight. And I'd experienced a lot of other highlights around like building things, buying things, fixing things, selling things. But that was a really a huge deal for me.
All right, Chris.
Yeah, honestly, for me, it was the same. It was building a company from 4 people in a rent office in Venice, California, to 650 people, and then selling it, and then seeing that whole. It wasn't a moment. It was just a process, and just that series of moments you go through was. I mean, there was a lot of. I mean, I think film-wise, I was in charge of all of Hidden Figures, which was a big accomplishment because it was actually pretty low budget, and so we had to get creative. And I did La La Land, and one time Rosario Dawson farted on me, and but yeah, that's pretty much it. Yeah, and during my career, the Seahawks won the Super Bowl, so that was probably the best part. Yeah.
No comment. Michelle?
So I'm from Athens, Georgia, and I still live there. And right after law school, I started my own entertainment law practice, which was not something I would recommend to most new graduates, but I was at a practice with a number of other solo attorneys. I had previously been a music writer or editor of the Alt Weekly there in Athens. And one of my writers came to me and said he's in a band with Cindy Wilson of the B-52s, and they had some contract work that needed to be done. And, I knew I wasn't going to get REM coming in because they've got Burtis and his forever. But to get a B-52 is like the highest accomplishment I think you can do as an Athens attorney for me. And I'll just never forget the day she came in the office and all the other attorneys were just falling over themselves trying to come help me. And I was like, this is my client. And that was a great feeling.
Awesome. Isaac?
Mine is right now like building FANBASE. It's something, it's unique because as a kid, I always thought I wanted to do one of 2 things, which is either be in the music industry or make video games. And now that I've wound up kind of doing both in a sense of building with technology, taking an idea, like FANBASE was really something that didn't exist. It was an idea in my head and turning it into something that was on a piece of paper and then building it to a physical product. And then now that it's in 212 countries on iOS and Android, we got 500,000 users, and I'm picking up the phone, and there's a large, like in the last maybe week, there's an entire like large Iranian community that has gotten on FANBASE because of the audio rooms, because that is how they communicate around their government. And so to me, that is really cool, is that the fact that something that I built right here in Atlanta, Georgia, is being used as a resource to bring people together around the planet who are oppressed. So that right now is the best thing ever,
And Dina?
Those people are in trouble now that you told the government.
No. They already told me that. The funny thing is, the people that are on the app have said that they ban all the apps, so everybody uses a VPN, and he's like, they're gonna try to get on your app and hack it and all that kind of stuff. And so we've been actually upping our security protocols. Like in the last month, we actually done a couple sprints where we've really been updating our security because of that. But that's part of growing.
Amazing. Dina?
Oh, well, you're doing something right then. So mine is similar to most people on the stage. I'm an entrepreneur for a long time in my career, and I built a recording studio in Midtown Atlanta called 12 Music and Studios. It was a staple here for 12 years, and I received a proclamation from the city. I nurtured talent and executives. I've had a hand in so many people's careers, so I think that was one of my proudest moments. And then I did sell it. Not as much as what Ryan has sold, Blackhall for. I didn't cash out that much, but that was another great moment, selling my first business. And so, yeah.
Awesome. So we have time for one more, and we'll let you guys go.
Hey, my name's Charles. I'm the last question, so sorry, y'all. What is your idea of what is your idea of social currency or social credit score? What is your idea about that?
Is that for everybody?
Take it.
Everybody. I don't espouse that. I don't believe in that. I think that, using technology in that fashion is, again, another way of controlling people. I'm more big in going the opposite direction of freedom. I want people to be free. Our brand statement at FANBASE is "Be you without limits." So that's whoever you are, wherever you are, whatever you want to do, whatever you believe in. Believe in that without limitation. So I'm not big on the WeChats of the world or whatever, and that can dictate whether or not you can buy water because your social credit score is bad. I'm not with that. You can't buy food today because we don't think you're a good person. That's wild.
Very interesting. So that's it. Let's give our panelists a round of applause, please, if you've gotten anything from this panel today.